Hello, everybody. This is Catholic Dad, episode number 188. One man's freedom is another man's tyranny. The world is a funny thing. Because we have two options in the world. We have one option to kneel before the tree of knowledge, and the tree of knowledge, just as a reminder, is in the Garden of Eden. And God said you could have pretty much everything you want in the whole world. You have all this food. You have complete happiness, complete joy, all the food you'll ever need, and everything you'll ever need. Just don't eat from the tree of knowledge. And humans couldn't help themselves. So Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, and that's the fallen nature of man. And we never thought we could get enough. We just couldn't follow God's law. That's one tree. And then another tree is another thing that we kneel before is crucifixion. The crucifixion is the opposite. It's essentially like you can have complete freedom, but you got to follow God's laws. And if you follow God's laws, that's where true freedom comes from, by knowing, loving, and serving God. And that you can't do things that offend God. And that's where another man's freedom comes from. So if you think about it, we have a secular humanism freedom, or liberalism freedom, or the tree of knowledge freedom, where God says you can have anything you want. You can eat any animal. You can have all the fruits and vegetables. You can have complete joy, husband and wife. But they had to go outside of that, and they had to push the envelope. And that tree of knowledge is essentially the offense of God's law, like essentially doing what God doesn't want you to do. And there's a whole segment of our population in the world that thinks that's freedom. The things that are like, aborting babies, or, fornicating with whomever you want, divorcing whomever you want, marrying with whomever you want. Aborting babies and contraception and you name it. Like, you could do whatever you want, and all the sins of the world are consequence-free if you're kneeling at the tree of knowledge, and that's absolute freedom in the secular humanistic world. And then there's absolute freedom in the case of the religious world, or the world where we kneel before the crucifixion and we abide by God's laws. And that absolute freedom is this, that we need to orient ourselves towards the good and towards the family, and we could do whatever we want with the exception of things that offend the family and offend God. So we don't contracept, we don't abort, we don't divorce, we don't, we have to respect our wives and our spouses, and we can't fornicate, and we can't adulter, and we can't do all sorts of other things. If we follow those laws, then we can essentially do whatever we want on this planet. We can, have all the fruits and vegetables and the animals of the world, and so on and so forth. We're back in the Garden of Eden. But human beings are very bad at not eating from the tree of knowledge. And now, if you think about it, the funny part is the people that are eating from the tree of knowledge, the people that want to fornicate and sodomize and have multiple marriages, or marry whomever they want outside of God's laws. The funny part is those people tend to worship the state. Like, they think that everything should be centralized. They tend to be far left ideology. They tend to believe the state should be big and the state should control most things in people's lives. And they tend to be like adversaries of private property, which I find kind of ironic. Like, they want complete sexual freedom and liberation from the family. That's what they want. They don't want any kind of they don't want their the sins of the sixth and ninth commandment getting in the way of their fun. Like, that's the kind of fun they want. But everything else is not free. Like, you can't have true private property. You can't use your property the way you want it. The state, they believe in high tax rates and so on and so forth. But you can kill your babies if you want. And in fact, the funny part about this is, if you get the secular humanistic world tends to even believe that your babies don't even belong to you, that essentially they're the property of the state, and the state can essentially say you got to vaccinate them, or you got to send them to public school. They tend to be big anti-homeschoolers. Now, if we go to the other side of the aisle, where people believe, the religious side of the aisle, they believe true freedom is found in the family, that we're going to follow all these laws, right? Like, we're not going to fornicate, and we're not going to adulter, and the 6 and 9 commandments, we're going to hold those passions at bay. But all the other things, like private property and entrepreneurial spirit and freedom and liberty in terms of the marketplace and economic activity, those people, the religious people, tend to hold fast to that. And so I just want to point that out as just as something to think about point, which I was kind of pondering today, before Mass, that the secular humanistic world wants absolute freedom with regards to breaking the family up. Like, they don't want the responsibility of family, right? But then they want tyranny of other things, like big governments and so on and so forth. Whereas the religious people tend to want the tyranny of the family. Like, you have to follow all these laws and you have to abide by God's laws. But you can have absolute freedoms in all sorts of other directions when it comes to economics and your entrepreneurial spirit, which is really funny because one man's freedom is another man's tyranny, and one man's tyranny is another man's freedom. They kind of work the opposite of each other. And I don't know which one you abide by, but I must say this, that if you abide by the fact that you think we're all free, we can do whatever we want in terms of our sexual mores, and we can even dispose and kill of the products of our conception, meaning the babies, that's like slightly inconsistent, because then you go on to believe that the state owns everything that we have. And so I think you have an inconsistency in your opinion, where the position is this, that we all work for each other on the other side of the aisle, the religious people, and that we're all directed toward one another, doing the good for one another in terms of family, but we could have all sorts of freedoms outside of that. That's kind of the American way of life. That's the way old Europe was, Middle Ages. And so this is Catholic Dad making you think about it. One man's freedom is another man's tyranny, and one man's tyranny is another man's freedom. Be the one that follows God's law and not man's law, because the fallen nature of man is difficult and it's hard, and it's like what we're working against. We want to be more religious. We want the tyranny of God, which is absolute freedom. So this is Catholic Dad making you think about it. Get to Mass, live a sacramental life, and please pray the daily rosary. God bless.